Indeed.
Where did you go?
I had a recent holiday to North Queensland. So I went and had 2 swims a day for 10 days.
Oh, fantastic. In warm water.
Warm
You
water.
could
And
go
very
swimming here. Yeah.
Yeah, I could. Yeah, got some swimming holes and got the family away from the daily grind, which is first time. I think we worked out we had a holiday in 2019. It's like, oh, okay, let's have another one.
That's a bit sad.
Indeed. I'm sure everyone who's listening to this on the recording will be very excited for these fun facts.
The recording always starts sooner than the actual event, so there we go. We'll wait until a few more people are logged on.
Oh, you got 32 participants. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
There's lots more people who register than actually sign on to webinars. It's
always
standard experience, I'm told. But it is an amazing technology.
Yep.
Sure is. What's that message up the top? A participant has enabled closed captioning. You can see this transcript.
Where's that?
So Zoom will automatically provide captions, or do its best to provide captions, so anyone can enable that themselves and read along at home.
Okay. Oh, great.
Oh, wait, just a minute or two and then we'll begin. Turned off my phone. I think we'll begin.
Yep.
We're here and you're here. We can see there are 37 participants already logged on, and that's wonderful. I can't see your faces. I don't know whether you can see our panel's faces. We hope so. I'm Margaret Steadman and I'm the President of Sustainable Living Tasmania, and welcome very much to this Food for Thought webinar. We're absolutely delighted to have our speakers, whom you'll meet as we go. And thank you to Helen for wrangling this, and for Todd behind the scenes for making the technology work. And keeping your fingers crossed also helps, I think. I'm on the land of the Muanina people, between the mountain and the river in Nipaluna, Hobart. There's no one now who calls themselves a proud Muanina man or woman because of the violence of colonisation in this part of the world. But I recognise their ongoing, long, many centuries care for country, and the ongoing connection and care of the Palawa people throughout Lutruwita, Tasmania, for this country, their country, and pay my respects to them. The topic for this evening's Food for Thought, Transport for Sustainable Living in Tasmania, is really timely. One of the fastest ways to get into an argument in Hobart, at least apart from talking about the stadium, that'll get you into an argument pretty quickly. But one of the other ways of getting into a lively discussion is to talk about city traffic and parking, and whether we should make space for bike paths, and whether lithium-ion batteries are a disaster, without even mentioning fossil fuels and climate change. So it's a really, it's a topic that we have all got opinions for. And the transport is intended to be the first sector-based emissions reduction and resilience plan as part of the state's climate action plan. So I'm sure that this food for thought will contribute to the discussions that will help build that aspect of the climate action plan. There are 3 speakers, as I said, and they'll each have 15 minutes to present their themes, and we'll then have close to 45 minutes for questions and discussion. So I hope that you'll be able to stay for the whole of the session. And if during the presentations you have a question, please put the question in the Q&A, which you can get into at the bottom of the Zoom screen between participants and chat. And Todd Harstein will wrangle the questions at the end. If the speakers are clever enough to do more than one thing at a time, they may answer some of your questions as we go. But please put questions in the Q&A. The first contribution is from Professor Peter Newman. We're really glad and honoured to have him as part of this conversation. He's the Professor of Sustainability at Curtin University, which is in Perth, Western Australia, my hometown. And just as a useless piece of information, Peter and I were fellow students at UWA at the same time. Perth's my hometown, or used to be my hometown. It's now Hobart. His career and his life have been dedicated to creating sustainable cities. He's currently the coordinating lead author for the IPCC on transport, and he will put Tasmania in global context. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Marg. And yeah, it's delightful to share something with Tasmania from the Whadjuk Noongar land here in Perth. I should also mention that the captain of the Fremantle Football Club, the Fremantle Dockers, Alex Pearce, is an Indigenous man from Tasmania. And he is a wonderful person. He's a great leader. And one of the things he's doing at the moment is pushing to get Woodside off their list of sponsors. And that's a terrific job if he can manage, because that's one of our campaigns at the moment. So let me just quickly go through what I've got here. And I would like to start by just saying, I choose to hope. This is something I've learned over many years of working in the environmental movement. It can be very depressing and full of despair. And, you know, right now with the extreme heat around the world, you just wonder, heck, have we got any chance at all? But I do choose to give mostly a hopeful perspective. So let me just show you what's come through in the recent year or so. This is the report that I helped on for the last 5 years. And when it was launched, we were on a fast track to climate disaster was the only way that the Secretary General talked about it. But in reality, there was some amazing good news in there. And this is the overall picture. So you look at the top there, the blue lines, they're all going down dramatically. And this is what happened in the 2010s. And in many ways, we didn't predict it in the IPCC. So PVs, onshore wind, offshore wind, concentrated solar power, and batteries and electric vehicles all dropped dramatically in their cost. So therefore, the exponential growth, which we often in the environmental movement were scared of, is now taking off in all of these areas. So exponential growth working for us is certainly a better thing for sustainability. Let me just give you this little quote. I just love it. China is on track to smash its renewables targets 5 years ahead of schedule. The country's installed solar capacity has already hit 228 gigawatts, which is equivalent to over 100 coal-fired power stations and more than the rest of the planet combined. I was in China last week, and it really is a remarkable thing to see what they're doing with with these new technologies, which are now the basis of the next economy and enabling us to become more sustainable. And I'll come back to that in a moment, but I can't seem to move it. There it is. But the world is changing quickly, and that sort of upward trend in renewables is the good news that's around. So it's not just there, though. We can look at Brazil and Vietnam and India and China. These places are doing amazing stuff. The other good news piece that I like to come back to is that it's not just governments anymore. It is the world of finance. So $88 trillion is now only available to projects that are net zero. Now, that's a lot of money. And for many years, we were fighting to get any money from governments, and they were always a bit slow. But this is an extraordinary change to happen. In WA, the government got rung up by the Reichsbank to say they were going to take two big finance loans away from them because they weren't doing enough on net zero. Within 2 weeks, they had a net zero policy announced. The money speaks, and it is affecting all of our actions at the moment. This is the only figure we came up with in our chapter on transport, and it, like many of them, there's a lot too much in it. But the key thing is here, the land-based electromobility, this one on the left, is at a technology readiness level. We said this in the last 5 years, that is very, very high. It is commercially available. So all of those technologies to do with land-based electromobility can now become electric and feed off solar, and sunshine is likely to be pretty cheap. So in the next 5 years, we'll see dramatic change there. In the next 10 years, that's where a lot of the things to do with demand management fit in. And that's important. They're a little bit harder. The hardest one of all is shipping and aviation. Hydrogen is just not working, and it is the only option at this stage to create something like ammonia for ships and synthetic jet fuel for planes. But the more smaller scale and land-based movement we can get, like the French have banned regional aviation, and getting ferries and things like that into electric is the way to go. And we've got all the data on that in our report. So there are very hopeful signs that a person like Tony Sieber is saying. He says that by 2030, solar will be 70% lower in cost than fossil fuels, and EVs will be 95% of the new car market. Now, that's pretty extraordinary. And that means in this short period that we're alive and can contribute, we're seeing a dramatic solar revolution, and it's feeding into transport. I think what it means is that we don't need subsidies to do that anymore. It's just a matter of making it equitable and rapid, removing barriers, removing things like oil subsidies, for example. I bet nobody could pick where that is, so I'll tell you. This is in Rwanda. It's an electric recharge service station at the airport in Rwanda. Now, if you've got it there, you've got it everywhere, and it is happening right around the world very quickly. And the figures show how rapidly we're going to get rid of cars and become electric. But the biggest change of all is up here in buses and 2- and 3-wheelers. Around the world, they are already over 40% of the market. Buses and 2- and 3-wheelers, the tuk-tuks and so on in Asia. So China and India are the big ones. But the problem is not just oil, it's too many cars. We cannot just have cheap electric solar vehicles ruining our cities the way diesel and petrol did. It isn't just about climate, but it is, in terms of sustainability, we have to deal with the car problem as well. Now, that's been my life. This is me in 1979 leading the charge to get the trains back in Perth, because this was the last train to Fremantle in 1979. And we won that, and we've been winning them ever since. And I became a transport person and added to the understanding of this issue by inventing this term automobile dependence. So nothing wrong with cars as long as we don't depend on them and build our cities in a way where you've got no other choices. That's the big thing, and that's what I've been writing about. So I've also been a very strong activist, and Perth has rebuilt itself with a lot of trains. We're building 7 new rail lines at the moment, and they've all been successful, cheaper, better, and have changed our lives. We've gone from 7 million passengers a year to 70 million passengers a year in a 15-year period. We are now have more than in Brisbane. So you can change, and we did quite a lot. But the missing link, and what I'd like to finish with, is this discussion about mid-tier transit, which I'm now calling trackless trams. It's a smart new kind of electric transit on roads. It's a new technology. I've just been to see it again in China. It links across corridors. So it's not a bus, it's not a train, it links, and it enables urban redevelopment. Instead of housing on the fringe, it enables us to redevelop, which is very important. So you're less car dependent. Now, this is when I first went to China and rode on this tram, and I was convinced that it was the future. This is doing 70 kilometres an hour down a main road, and that child is not being grabbed by the parents to hold on to it because it's shaking and bucking and like most buses do. So it is very different. Now, what's happened is that the Chinese rail company that builds these high-speed rails took 6 innovations and put it in a bus so that it actually transformed it into something more train-like. Now, we are the only research group in the world that has picked this up. For some reason, the Americans and the Europeans are stuck on buses and trains and nothing in between. So this is what they look like, and the batteries on the roof. And this particular version follows a painted line on the road. So it's very smart. It uses smart technology, censoring its way. It is autonomous, but it's got a driver. And we've written lots of books about it and papers. That's a free one that you can get off our website. So it's quite a change. And we've been to Philadelphia, Chandigarh and Bulawayo to show that it works outside Perth. And we've been across our cities looking at all of those places as well. And Melbourne looks like being one of the first to put in something. They've got a project, the Caulfield-Rowville trackless tram project, which goes through Monash out to Chadstone. The shopping centre out there wants to help fund it. But there's lots of other ones in Melbourne as well. So we're all moving that way. I went to Sharm el-Sheikh, COP27, and this is me and Josh Byrne down on the right there, as we talked about trackless trams. And there were so many people saying, oh, it's so important to hear these good news stories. Can you talk to the whole nation-state auditorium? And we did. And after that, the Chinese said, all right, you can have a tram. We'll give it to you. Australia DRT project was born. This one follows the magnetic nails in the road. And this one is being built for us. And last week we went and looked at it, and this is where we were part of the certification, the process of trialing it. And you can see again, this is not like a bus. It is more train-like, but it is the kind of price that buses provide. So it's about 1/10 of the cost of light rail. So how do we link a trackless tram into a future net zero city? Very quickly, stations can be full of PVs and interesting sustainable architecture and design, but if you string them along like a string of pearls along a transit corridor with trackless trams, all providing an opportunity for refilling, recharging of the various kinds to the various vehicles, you can have a set of net zero precincts emerging. And I just wonder how we could think about that in terms of Hobart. You've got the main roads very clearly revealed here. Why not have trackless trams that could be built along each of these, providing opportunities for building net zero precincts around stations? That's the concept that we're pushing at the moment across Australia. We've got lots of opportunities to do that. In Perth, all the local governments have got together and they've showed all of these opportunities to build trackless trams and net zero precincts along there. And this is the state government's attempt to show what they would do, and that turned out to be the same, which is very fortunate. So rebuilding any city so that you can have these corridors with net zero precincts that are joined together, all running on electric and solar power. So you can transform a city, and you can do it quickly if you imagine it enough. There's a net zero corridor emerging out of a main road. So we can do it with partnerships. We can do it with integrated micro mobility and walkability. This is the picture for one of the outer western suburbs of Sydney, what they want with a trackless tram and integrated bikes, attracting development around the stations with community-driven concepts around each station, and many opportunities. So I'll leave this with you if you want to get in contact with us. If you want lots of videos and publications, that's there. And the net zero practice in the Maelstrom is the latest thing I've written about this, plus a book called Greening the Greyfields. That's enough from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. That was inspiring. I definitely want some of those. I think that will be a real stimulation to conversations around how to work in Tasmania. And I like that you are not just focusing on the four-wheeled machines, but I'm a great fan and rider of an electric bike, which is just perfect for Hobart.
Yeah, they are good.
Yep. So our next speaker is Rachel Hay. She's a Tasmanian researcher, writer and activist, and is currently working with the wonderful Australia Remade organisation. If you don't know anything about Australia Remade, just Google it. They are a wonderful organisation with a visionary story. She'll tell us where Tasmania is at and what policy changes to get us to where we need to be, based on the paper she recently released as a dynamic member of Climate Tasmania. She and I are both members of Climate Tasmania. It's a great little expert group. Go for it, Rachel.
Thanks so much, Margaret. Okay. So yeah, thank you, Margaret. Thanks, everyone. I'm really excited to be able to chat to you all today. So I just want to thank you first for having me and run you through why transport is the next cab off the rank, so to speak, in terms of Tasmania, in terms of decarbonisation. And if you're having a wine at home, you might want to have a little drink every time I mention a transport pun. That might make the evening go a lot faster. Yeah, through my work at Climate Tasmania, I've written a report kind of anticipating where transport might be going next in Tassie. We know that we're already seeing the effects of climate change here and across the globe, and that we need to rapidly decarbonise our emissions to prevent the worst of climate change. And just a bit of background, so last year the Tasmanian government committed to a target of net zero emissions by 2030 in their amendments to the Climate Change Act, and they also committed to putting in place transport decarbonisation plans. But our net zero status down here isn't secured. We have been net zero, I think, since 2013, but it relies on land use and forestry offsets, and that can be a bit unpredictable. So
Rachel, can I just interrupt? The screen is a bit muddled. It's
oh no, technology.
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah,
that's
cool.
it. Thank you. Yep.
No worries, thanks. Yeah, so we do need to decarbonise down here, and we're in the lucky position of being able to generate 100% of our energy renewably, which means, unlike other states, the first kind of sector that we should go to decarbonise is transport. And that's because it's our second highest emitting subsector, so 21% of our emissions after agriculture. And there's also, as Peter mentioned, a lot of near-term abatement opportunities. The technology is there. There's a lot of exciting things that we can do in this space, which, you know, not only lead to decarbonisation, but kind of help us live a better life. Yeah, so we've got the Tassie government preparing a transport emissions reduction plan, which is due by the end of this year. And I just want to take you through now some of the things that we've suggested to them as a bit of a helping hand, which could be good policies to push us towards decarbonising our transport sector. Hopefully that looks all right. Hard to tell.
It's a bit shaken up.
Interesting. Try it again.
Just touch it, screen
Oh.
again.
There you go. So down here in Tassie, we're ideally placed for uptake of electric vehicles. So as I mentioned, we're able to generate 100% of our energy renewably. We have a high reliance on private cars at the moment. So 98% of homes own 2 or more registered vehicles, which is the highest in the nation. We also have the oldest cars in Australia, which means there's more opportunities for decarbonisation. We've got a compact geography, which makes it easier to place charging infrastructure at key locations. It suits our kind of clean green image. And Tasmanians also have a lot to gain from switching to EVs. So improved health, reduced cost, and this research here by the Australia Institute shows that Tasmanians really want the government to help them to switch to EVs. So I'm going to give it a minute. So the Tasmanian government's made a really good start towards this. They've implemented a lot of great policies. So a stamp duty waiver, registration waiver for car rental companies, but unfortunately both of those have ended now, as I understand it.
Can you give it a bit of a shake? I'm not sure what you need to do, Rachel, but
neither do I. Oh, that was better for a second.
That's it. Okay.
Cool. We've had a couple of good rounds of charging infrastructure grants, government fleet target, although recent budget estimates showed that we're not very far towards achieving that. And there's also been trials of electrifying public transport and improving public transport services. Don't know what it needs anyway. So unfortunately, despite that, EV uptake is still slow. So only 0.3% of vehicles in Tasmania are electric, and only 3% of vehicle sales in 2022 are electric. So we clearly need to do more to accelerate that uptake. there's a little table here of some of the policies in other states and territories. So it's an easy roadmap that we can follow to kind of put these policies in place to incentivise electric vehicle uptake. So one of the things that we can do is put in some targets which give us something to work towards. They can keep the government accountable as well. So first, I think we need a overarching target of how much emissions we want to reduce through transport. UTAS has suggested 37% by 2030. And then also a number of nations internationally have set targets for electric vehicle uptake. So Norway, for example, leads the world at 100% of new car sales by 2025. And our recommendation is that the Tasmanian government set a target of 100% of new electric vehicle sales to be electric by 2030. And that's because they have stated that they want to be a climate leader. So we're just really taking that at face value and suggesting that they do that in terms of electric vehicle policies. So another thing that can be done is reducing purchase price of electric vehicles to help people get into the market, because obviously they're a bit expensive at the moment. So a number of studies have shown that reducing purchase price is really the best thing that can be done to accelerate that electric vehicle uptake. So stamp duty waiver is a great thing to bring back, and the registration waiver, extending that out to everyone this time. Both of those can work in conjunction with each other, as well as working in conjunction with a subsidy, a rebate, a loan, and that might be $3,000. There's a few other states and territories with one like that, or ACT has a $15,000 interest-free loan scheme, which is a good idea as well. And there's also emerging dialogue about, making these means tested, so people who experience greater disadvantage can have a bit more of a helping hand, and that sounds like a great idea to me. So unfortunately, we do currently have a commitment from the Tasmanian government to implement an EV tax. It was in the budget a couple of years ago. So that will happen when new vehicle sales reach 30% or in 2027. But honestly, I'm not sure this is a great policy at this stage. What we really need to be working on is actually working towards incentivisation instead of de-incentivisation, and that's what this policy really does. It creates financial burdens on people who are trying to get into the EV market, and it's also currently being challenged in the High Court, so we're actually not sure if it's even legal. So another thing that can be done is increasing electric vehicle charges.
Can you give us another click?
Yeah.
Rachel, see if it clears itself.
Clearly it's too much for my old computer. Imagine the rest of it for yourselves.
Okay.
So we need more fast chargers at key locations. So a lot of chargers at the moment aren't fast chargers, they're just wall plugins. It'd also be great to have more chargers in rural areas and other key locations to combat the range anxiety, which is still really present. And we're also going to need to upscale electric vehicle chargers as more electric vehicles do come onto the market. So 32% of Tassie's transport emissions come from heavy vehicles like trucks and buses, despite the fact that they are quite a small amount of the road population. So we need to focus on those heavier vehicles as well as passenger vehicles. So similar kind of things can be done here: purchase price incentives, a target, charging infrastructure, and a few truck specific ones like exempting them from truck curfews from urban areas, changing weight and width limits to accommodate the batteries. That can all help to incentivise the uptake there. Also, I think important for the government to reward the innovation that's happening in this sector at the moment and kind of fuel it as well. So, for example, we've got the Good Car Company here. They're supporting secondhand EVs, selling them sometimes for under half the price, I think, of a new electric vehicle. That's fantastic. We've got Elphinstone manufacturing hard rock mining equipment, which is electric, and Incat building the world's largest electric ship. So a lot happening down here, and I think there's a lot of scope for more to happen. We also need to focus on buses, given that they're a heavy vehicle and quite a lot of that, emissions come from them. So we really need to go beyond the trial phase in terms of transitioning our bus fleet. A lot of other states and territories around Australia have gone past that. And yeah, we've also got buses in Tassie which have recently been manufactured, which have the ability to be retrofitted. And yeah, we're recommending that we start getting on 100% of new bus purchases be electric by 2025, and we transition the fleet by 2030. That's quite a progressive target, and that's, again, taking the government at what it says. It wants to be a climate leader, so that's why we're recommending that. So as Peter was talking about before, EVs alone aren't going to get us where we need to be. And it's also not an equitable way to be reducing our emissions. We really need to think about, a lot of people can't buy an EV, and it's not going to help their health or congestion to be just replacing petrol cars with EVs. So I think this is really exciting. It's people like the Climate Council are arguing that we need a mode shift, so towards public and active transport, away from cars, and really, redesigning our cities based on that, so they're better for not just the planet, but for us as well. But currently we only have 2.5 Tasmanians using a public bus to get to work, so clearly we need to do more to incentivise that shift. It'd be great to have a target towards increased public transport use, and there's a number of things that the Tasmanian government can do to increase public transport use. So things like increasing availability of public bus services out of peak times, making services more reliable, increasing frequency and long waiting times, increasing services in rural areas, reducing bus fares, and reducing overcrowding. So active transport is another really key area that we need to focus on. So that can include activities like walking, cycling, scootering, and again, gives us an opportunity to redesign our cities so they're better for congestion, health, and the environment. Hobart City Council recently found that when a person walks or cycles, their carbon footprint is reduced by 84%. And there's a lot of potential for decarbonisation here. So we've got 28% of Australians living and working in the same postcode. So yeah, that's short trips that can be taken through this active transport. The Climate Council again has argued that we need to shift to 15% of transport being active. But currently we only have about 5% of people in Tassie using active transport. So it'd be great to have a target towards achieving that. And we can do that by things like redesigning the cities so they're more user-friendly, so making footpaths, crossings and roads safer, segregating bike paths, increasing signage, lights and surveillance, reducing driver speeds, improving driver awareness, having showering and storage facilities at either end of the trip, increasing rest spots, connecting to active and public transport routes, connecting active to public transport routes, and as well as bringing purchase price incentives for things like electric vehicles. So you can read the full paper on Climate Tasmania's website. There's ways to stay in touch there. As I said before, the Tasmanian government should be releasing its plan by the end of the year, and that'll be open for public comment. So yeah, it'd be great to hear in that process what what people want for Tasmania's transport. Thanks for listening. I'm looking forward to hearing your questions.
Thanks, Rachel. I think you want some pictures of old people on bikes in there. That they're perfect for people my age. Oh, okay. Now my job is to introduce Anton rather than just start saying how wonderful e-bikes are. Let me introduce Anton Vikstrom to you. He's a founding director of the social enterprise Good Car Company, which sells used and new e-vehicles Australia-wide, I think, Anton. Is that correct now? Yep, started right here in Tasmania, however, and he's the living embodiment of what can be achieved when you're fearless and have good mates. He's going to give us the answers to the electric vehicle critics. Your turn now, Anton. Thank you.
Well, thank you. That's thanks for the introduction, Margaret. And it's lovely to be here in such good company. And I think when I was studying environmental science, Peter's books were on the shelf in the library as well. And then just being on the same panel is pretty awesome. And it's great the work that Rachel's been doing in the policy sphere. Tonight, I'm just going to talk about two things. And I used to work for Sustainable Living Tasmania back in the day and worked in kind of the energy sphere. And I think one of the really interesting things is we've got this intersectionality between transport and energy that's happening at the moment. So I'll just launch into a presentation if I can. Hopefully mine works. You never know how it goes until you actually get started though, do you? So can you see a picture of three smiling faces there?
Yeah, those are your good mates that I mentioned.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep. So we started this business a bit over 4 years ago, and we wanted an EV and simply couldn't afford one. And we looked around, and some friends had imported one from overseas that was secondhand. They were driving around in an EV and not trying to build one in the shed, which seemed to be the only affordable option at that point in time. And boy, like, the world has moved a lot since there, including what we've been up to, which is we've built up the Good Car Company as a social enterprise, and it's focusing on how do we deal with affordability and availability. So we have problems with model availability, and we just the purchase price has been just way too high. And we've built that out to a national online marketplace and have community events based around the country. So I'm going to talk about the cost of the ice epidemic in Tasmania. And by the ice epidemic, I'm talking about internal combustion engines rather than anything you might be injecting or snorting or whatever people do. And the cost is around 800 million. Sorry, I've got my picture. 800 million litres of petrol and diesel every year. So it's roughly half petrol and half diesel used in Tasmania, and that's for our land-based transport. If you poured all of that out, you get 350 swimming pools of fuel. And I'd hate to see the Olympic Games that happened in that setting. But possibly, which is even more disturbing than 350 swimming pools of crude oil, is that there's $1.5 billion spent every year on our transport fuels just in the state of Tasmania. That's $1.5 billion that is sent overseas, sent out of state, and it disappears into the ether and into probably some of the more unsavoury parts of the world. And when we see what's been done to support that through time, it's quite all the oil wars and so forth. So our transport choices are contributing with global implications. And then if we're weighing up the scales, here's the opportunities that come from EVs. And I like this one, it kind of twitches your eyes a bit, but we're talking about if we replaced all of that petrol and replaced it with electricity, just charging out of your power point at standard electricity tariffs, we'd spend 500 million. That is 1/3 of the amount of money we're spending on petrol and diesel from a straight change out. And that's not even charging off solar or charging off cheap power. That's the standard electricity tariff in Tasmania. But where's the electricity coming from? Well, you're going to create 18% aggregate increase in electricity demand. And how are you going to create this energy? And what you need is around 184 wind turbines. Like that. That's 4 of these Cattle Hill wind turbine farms to provide all of your renewable energy in perpetuity. And it costs a lot to build wind farms like that. The capital cost is about 1.1 billion. So every year we spend 1.5 billion on petrol and diesel every year, just putting it into the cars. We could build the renewable infrastructure to power all of those vehicles for 1.1, so less. 1 year's capital investment versus your annual recurring cost of fuel. So that makes EVs an opportunity. The second part of the opportunity sits here in this little diagram, and it's about what a battery is in an electric car, and it's an energy asset. So one thing is we can drive to the shops, we can go to the beach or go swimming or whatever we want to do with our vehicle, and that's good. But that vehicle, when it's sitting in a driveway or it's sitting at a depot or a garage, can actually help support the electricity network. So when we've got the moments where we've got heaps of sunshine, all those solar panels are really generating a lot of energy. Where does it go? It goes into the cars. And the same thing, we've got these peak periods on the electricity network where all of the electricity infrastructure is built to deal with, in Tasmania, the coldest morning in winter. Our vehicles could help discharge their electricity into the grid and help support it in this point. Conversely, on the mainland, it's that afternoon period on the hottest days. And once again, these EVs are providing an electricity asset. And I suppose the other thing is we end up with is the naysayers, is what happens in this supply chain. Where do these batteries come from? Where do they go? The batteries are going to wear out. And being in the used electric vehicle space, we get asked these questions every day. So we've had to spend a fair bit of work on mulling out the answers to these. And unfortunately, there's a bunch of systems and processes off the shelf or in the process of being built. So first of all, there's an awesome company based out of Melbourne called Re-Electrify, and they go and repurpose old EV batteries as stationary storage. So an old battery that comes out of a car, it can then power underneath a supermarket or behind the meter on a wind farm. It's actually helping support the electricity grid. Following that, there's systems in place to recover about 98% of the materials in an EV battery. And if you look at the cost of lithium ore, the costs of processing it, getting a relatively high grade ore delivered to your doorstep, which is what that's an old dead battery is, urban mining is going to be a highly valued part of the supply chain. And we're also fortunate to be partnering with companies like EVs Enhanced in New Zealand, who are creating aftermarket EV batteries. So vehicles reach the end of their life and have a second opportunity to go out and drive again for another 200, 300, 400,000 kilometres. But how is Tasmania going to position itself in this? And there's a few things we need to be working on in terms of the skills network for the state. There's some relatively decent tech jobs that are underway at the moment and have got an ability to grow further, which is in terms of hacking the cars, battery management systems, firmware, changing the way that the cars behave. And there's a great company in Launceston who does a bunch of work on this, which is how they control the car's electronic architecture. There's the basic stuff, which we haven't even started with in terms of the ecosystem, which is the training for servicing, repair, and further on the replacement of batteries. So here's us working with some local mechanics and a national electrical network. So we're creating documentation and procedures for how to, this is repairing and replacing battery modules in vehicles. So it's the skills build up is necessary there. There will be, in each state I envisage, local high-tech manufacturing of replacement battery packs across various vehicles. And it's where you get the benefits of designs, 3D printing, and small-scale robotics can actually make these processes actually localized and quite well paid and quite high value. And I touched on before the deployment of the old batteries as stationary storage. And if there's a politician in the crowd who's looking to work out how they can hold the electorate of Bass for eternity, may I just talk to my Viking relatives who live in the area of Sweden which has Nordvolt built there, which is a gigafactory for making batteries. Nordvolt employs 3,000 people now, creating just the battery cells. When they're doing the analysis of where to position this factory, they needed to be able to power it from large amounts of reliable renewables in order to create low emissions batteries. They need to have access to good shipping lines for the movement of materials. And then it needed a very well-educated workforce and a research workforce around it. So they needed universities surrounding it. And I think that can all be achieved up in the north of the state. And I would love to see someone take that little nugget when they're next talking to the minister or next talking to somebody who's looking for that announceable. There's a great one for you. So that's my presentation. I'm happy to talk across a whole bunch of other topics. I have tried to make it not too many pictures of cars and more about the ideas, but thanks for having me on here.
Thank you very much, Anton, and thank you to all of the speakers for being so engagingly positive and encouraging that there is a real future for sustainable transport in Tasmania. And so, well, I'm going to hand over immediately to Todd, who's going to wrangle the questions. But actually, I usually assert my capacity as because I'm the MC to ask a question straight away anyway. And I was really interested to hear you say, Peter, that hydrogen is just not working. Can you just speak to that really briefly, please?
Yeah, look, we had some of the Toyota people working with us on our chapter in the transport side of IPCC, and they explained that hydrogen for transport was high on their agenda in Japan after the tsunami, because they wanted buses that were powered by hydrogen to go to these sites if it happened again, so they could have a source of power that would last longer than a battery would. And that was the main motivation. Unfortunately, it's always turned out to be about 3 times more expensive than an electric bus. So all the heavy vehicle ideas which were thought to be better with a hydrogen fuel cell have turned out to not be commercial. So all of the ore trains in our northwest, all of the big ore trucks, all of the buses and trucks around the world are now moving towards lithium-ion batteries rather than hydrogen fuel cells. The problem with hydrogen is that it's very hard to store and distribute, whereas electricity is right there. We've got it; it's already ready for us, and so we're just not. We're wasting time and money if we focus on hydrogen. But the gas industry loves hydrogen because they think all we need to do is say, yeah, well, we can keep expanding our gas network because you can just put hydrogen in it later. Well, you can't for a start. It'll take a few percent only before it cracks the metal. Hydrogen is a great reducing agent. So hydrogen is necessary for industry processing. That's what it's necessary for. And we should not be wasting masses of green hydrogen production on cars and any kind of vehicle. Just to finish that, because one of the questions was about all of these heavy vehicles. And yes, all of them can be done with lithium-ion batteries. And the Incat ferry, which my school colleague Bob Clifford has produced, I did go to school in Hobart, and that electric ferry is the terrific global first, and he's been an innovator for some time there on these ferries. That's the kind of thing that we can do with electric ferries. But big ships, they're going to need some kind of hydrogen-based fuel in them. But the land-based stuff, you just don't need hydrogen to be used.
Thanks, Peter. Over to you now, Todd. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Great discussion so far. Peter, just picking up on your last point about hydrogen, I believe that the gas pipeline in Tasmania is a bit different because it's newer. It's not made from metal, and so it doesn't have the cracking problem. But I think there's another limitation in the percentage of hydrogen that most gas-based appliances can take without them all needing to be replaced. But you know, Tasmania has such little dependency on gas that I think it makes much more sense to just electrify and pretty much get rid of the gas network unless there are applications for hydrogen in heavy industry, particularly for reduction in manganese and aluminium in particular up in Bell Bay. But we're talking about transport today, so let's get off that topic. We have a bunch of questions here. First one's for Peter. It's about reducing car dependency in rural and remote areas or suburban areas that are more spread out. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, the whole idea of car dependency is that you live in situations where you can walk and cycle easily, and that public transport can service. So scattered housing becomes an issue, and peri-urban developments around the world, which are set in forests and so on, and the ones that are mostly being burnt in the bushfires, are all have this problem. So as we rebuild anything on the fringes or scattered housing, it's so much better if we could get eco-villages where people can live and share the power and water and the whole system of managing a small town or a village, and that could then be serviced by an electric transit system of some kind. Meanwhile, I think electric vehicles of two-wheel kind can get you out to quite a distance these days and enable you to perhaps reach centres where there could be public transport. But I think there is going to be a reaction to living out in a scattered way, and that eco-villages are now operating. We've got one in WA called Witchcliffe. If you Google Witchcliffe, there are 400 houses in this new development. It's completely net zero. It has its own power and water, but the power is linked into the grid so that they can give back to the grid. They have electric vehicle recharge happening in the 22 different villages. Each one has a high charge recharger and a high rate recharger, and they actually make money off passing tourists who can use them. But they are all managed separately with the microgrid for each of those places, and it's all based on permaculture. So those kind of ideas of an eco-village, that's on the outskirts of Margaret River. It works well because it works as a shared place. So sustainable living is the basis of that place. And it's working well. People have come from all around the world to live there. And it's really quite cheap. You can get a place there for $200,000, which is pretty amazing. Certainly gives a much better place for kids to grow up and for people to grow old in. And that's happening.
Thank you, Peter. Another question for you. In Tasmania, particularly in Hobart and Launceston, there's a lot of steep hills. People tend to live at the top of the hill, and the other things they visit are down the bottom. So if that last kilometre or several kilometres of travel is a challenge, what would you suggest for that? Do trackless trams work?
Yeah, the trackless tram is an extraordinary vehicle because it can go up steeper slopes than light rail. Light rail is always kind of 5 to 6% type of hill, and that's definitely harder to achieve in a place like Hobart. But the trackless tram can go up to 15%. And if you've driven an electric vehicle, you see the extraordinary acceleration and deceleration potential that's there inherently in a vehicle that's electric. And so it does make it easier once it's electric, but they are reasonably light because they don't have the great big diesel engines, that buses have. And that enables them to go up and down quite steep slopes. They operate in snow and in ice and all kinds of heat. They've been tested right through China. They're being used right through Chinese cities in all kinds of ways, but they've never been certified outside China. And that's what we're doing now so that we can introduce them. And I think they're going to be a big hit in cities that need to have a better public transport system than has been operating at the moment.
I think electric bikes as well also are really good in Nipple and Hobart. I know I certainly wouldn't want to walk up the hill to my place, but on an electric bike, I think it's a lot easier. And obviously they are a bit more expensive than, usual bikes, but I think incentivizing that, giving people some just some cash so they can afford it could really help.
Thank you. There's a question here about new battery technologies, saying that every few months you read about a new exciting one with more lifespan or that's more stable. So, for example, a reduced fire risk, less rare metal usage, etc. Looking into the future, would there be any policy options to help Tasmania become an early adopter?
Can I just jump in first, because you were mentioning the lithium-ion battery issue. We produce in Western Australia half of the world's lithium and all of the other critical minerals that are used in battery production. By the way, we're not clever. We've just got a very exposed crust, because we've not had any of the volcanic activity or glaciation that the eastern states have had. And so we can easily get to crustal elements, and all of the battery minerals are crustal elements. They're not that difficult to get to and to make available. So it's really funny to me to see that Chevron and other organisations like that have discovered the limits to growth. You remember the limits to growth said, we're all going to die because we're going to run out of stuff. And all of the economists said, oh, no, we'll always make it cheaper and other resources will become available. And now the environmentalists are saying, oh, no, there's no limits to growth because there's all of this stuff available. And the reality is that 4 million tonnes a year of lithium are produced in Western Australia. That's half of the world's needs. And we produce half of the world's iron ore, which is 1,000 million tonnes a year. So it's a boutique element. You only need little bits of it to get these batteries and so We've got 8 new lithium mines that have set up, and all the other critical minerals, including rare earths, are taking off. So we are committed, and there's a very strong policy to say we will process these things, and we are now processing lithium into lithium hydroxide, which is 10 times the value, and exporting that rather than the ore. But we will also recycle batteries, and we will get involved in the whole process of helping to set up the next regime around batteries. And there are lots of them starting, but the reality is that the commerciality of lithium-ion batteries is going to last 10 or 20 years. They have been brought down in cost by the rapid mass production in China, same way they did with PVs, and the same way they're now doing with electric vehicles. They have a big enough market to bring the prices down. And once they're down there, they're very hard to compete with any of these other versions. So I don't think there's going to be much difference in the technologies that are around. We've got 10 or 20 years to help save the planet. And we've got to get on with these technologies. There are about 30 different lithium-ion batteries, by the way. They're lithium-ion phosphate and lithium titanium, whatever. And they each have their particular roles and different sources. But I don't think we're going to get rid of the lithium-ion battery. I think it's a brilliant piece of technology.
Great. What about the safety element there? Every now and then you hear, I'm not sure if it's just scaremongering from the critics saying,
no,
it's not
scaremongering.
It's burning everywhere.
Yeah,
or
no, it's
just a very low percentage.
Well, it is fairly low, but it's increasingly done by these scooters that have no regulations on them, and they get really poor quality lithium-ion batteries. So if you've got a scooter, make sure it's not in your house, because it could blow up your house. There is no regulation at the moment on those scooters in Australia. So we've got to get proper regulatory controls of lithium-ion batteries. That's a critical part of the future.
With the safety concerns of, first on the tech aspect of it is, I think Peter covered it very well. There's heaps of different chemistries, and I think we're at the point of relatively mature technology, but still getting pretty good gains of performance increase and battery density out of the lithium. There will be something else will come along, but whether it's going to save the day, I think the stuff we've got now can save the day. So I'm waiting for 4 years because I read something in New Scientist that the air battery is going to save the day. Is a fool's mission, I think. And as far as the safety side of it goes, is there's both the battery and the battery management system, and either of those can cause problems in the cells. And the reason a lithium fire is so bloody scary is it's quite hard to put out. And there's a lot of energy in those cells to burn up. A petrol fire happens a lot. Petrol cars catch on fire all the time. They tend to get it over with relatively quickly. So half an hour later, there's nothing left, whereas a lithium fire is days later. What there is each company's reputation is based on the quality of their cells. So the company that brings out the EV that, like an old Pinto that catches on fire, the company that does that goes broke. So there's a hell of a lot of incentive on making the EVs safe from the chemistry perspective, as well as the electrical control perspective, and the quality assurance in the manufacturing processes as well. I was recently over in India seeing Ola, who make electric two-wheel scooters, and they've got a fact, like in terms of that transition. They've built a factory which is going to be producing a 2-wheel scooter every 2 seconds. And out of that factory, and then that's going to only produce about 10% of India's scooter requirements. So there, each individual cell in a battery pack is fused so that if there's anything like where anything goes wrong within that cell, it just short circuits and reduces the chance of fire. So that's happening in Tesla batteries, and it's happening throughout, that we're looking at multiple layers of redundancy to prevent anything bad happening there. Yeah.
Thank you. Perhaps a question for Rachel, at least to begin with. Others might want to jump in as well. It's on behaviour change and the dependency of getting of cars to get young school students to school, and wondering how we can break out of that. It seems to be a tough nut to crack. Any ideas?
Yeah, I think in Tassie we've got this mentality about cars, you know, we have to have a car, but actually public transport isn't that scary. It's actually quite nice. So I think if we, you know, focus on, and the government, when I say we, I mean the government, if they focus on, you know, making public transport better, reducing some of those barriers, like for example, when I used to live in Dodgers Ferry, and the bus from there, I think is $12 to get into Newman and Hobart, and that's a 40-minute car ride. So like there's easy things that we can do to incentivize public transport use. Yeah, and things like I've heard stories about overcrowding on buses in Kingston, but I've heard the government brought in more buses to try and fix that for school kids. That's a great option. And things like there's been a lot of stories about not having enough bus drivers. Maybe that's making the industry a better place to be in. Maybe that's wages, maybe that's safety. There's a lot of things that we can do to increase public transport use.
I can jump in on that. The walking school bus is an idea that started in Brisbane and has spread around the world. It basically works by parents in a particular area getting together and having all the kids in that area walk together, but with one adult each day. So it means that the kids are having fun walking together, and they're getting fitter and healthier. Walking is considerably better for kids as well as parents, but there has been a lot of studies done on the psychology of kids who walk to school compared to kids who've driven to school, being so much more attentive and able to learn, because that walking process opens up your lungs and enables you to be more alive for learning. And that process is assisted by people walking together. It also is part of placemaking and being part of a community. In terms of sustainable living, I think it's one of the most basic things you can do is walk more, but walking to school for kids is very fundamental. But in Auckland, there was one person who said once that they had organised 26 walking school buses through their local government. And, you know, it's not that hard to do, but you've just got to go to places and schools and get the parents together and say, look, can you do this? And set them up, and away they go, and they have a ball. They get to know.
Can we make a
so
bit of
better.
a comment here, Peter? Because maybe Helen would like to make some comments, because we've historically, Sustainable Living Tasmania has worked at starting walking school buses. Do you want to reflect on that, Helen?
Yes, I think there are still quite a few going. They're mainly in the more kind of progressive suburbs where kids are more likely to go to a nearby school. So there's South Hobart, Taroona, West Hobart. There are still quite well, I think, very successful walking school bus models in Hobart and in Tasmania generally that we could actually transfer to other places. I think it's time actually to regenerate that idea, and thank you for bringing it up.
My recollection is that one of the inhibitors was the requirements of the Department of Education. It wasn't just one adult who had to be part of the walking school bus, it was a number. The kids all had to wear high vis, and there were a lot of disincentives along the way as well. Yeah, it's not quite as straightforward as you're suggesting, Peter, if it's an officially sanctioned and organised walking bus.
Just do it, I reckon.
Yeah, no, I was going to say informal ones would work better. Yep.
I think this speaks to a broader point as well about I didn't get into the transport space because I love buses or whatever. The reason that I'm here is because I can see it's where we need to be for climate action. And young people are really passionate about climate action. So I think we need to change the dialogue around decarbonisation of the transport sector. It is climate action. It's where people will be making climate action in the next 10 years. So if we kind of shift that dialogue, I think we can get more people, particularly young people, interested in this stuff. And maybe that's a job for us in the sustainability community.
Good advice.
So there's another question here, or actually following on from that last question about school students, just more generally about young people who are coming up to the age where they can get their licenses and start driving. How do we encourage them to stick with public transport and active transport when the opportunity opens up for them to just jump in a car and drive around and the freedom that gives? I've heard read various articles saying that younger people are delaying getting their licenses and sometimes just not getting licenses at all. Is that a broad trend, and what's driving that, and what can we do to help people keep using active transport and public transport?
Yeah, the book that I've written called The End of Automobile Dependence goes through all that. The data in the US started coming out showing that it was there was a reduction in car use per capita happening in ways that were not thought of before. Everyone just considered that it would keep going up, per capita car use, and it turned, and it continued to go down. And then all the studies showed that it was because younger people were just saying, well, we just don't like driving. It's just so boring, stuck on a freeway, when you can go with your friends in a bus, or you can walk, or you can bike, and the other options were more attractive. It really ground to a halt in the US, because what was basically happening was that the inner cities began to be filled by younger people who were getting jobs locally and making them very trendy, a bit like Hobart, actually. The outer suburb of Melbourne that became a very trendy place to live. And that process, because it wasn't when I was living there, but that reached its limits because there was not enough inner city type housing being built to continue that process. And it's really started growing again, car use per capita. But so you've got to have a range of things that bring about such a change. It's not just the fact that younger people are going to do it for us. That you do need to have more housing that is likely to be of benefit to people who want to live in a way that they can use less cars. Which is why I got into the trackless tram and said, let's try and rebuild our houses more and more so that they can be in urban villages, if you like, along a corridor, and enable more people to be living closer to things.
reflecting on my own experience, coming up on the 8-year anniversary since I got my license very soon, so you can guess my age from that. But yeah, it wasn't that long ago where I was in the position where I was trying really hard to get my car license, and that was because I lived out of the city. I didn't want to be stuck on a crowded bus. Coming from down in Dodgers, the congestion is so bad that it in the mornings that it doubles the length of time of a trip. So I wanted the flexibility to go outside of hours. And again, the price was really expensive. So those were all deterrent factors for me of catching public transport. And if we actually, you know, addressed those factors, it's not that hard. I think we can see more people in rural areas actually incentivized to catch public transport.
Mm.
Can I ask Todd, can I ask Peter if he's heard of have you heard of the controversy about the Northern Rail link in Tasmania from the Macquarie Point through to basically Austin's Ferry? There's an old rail line there.
I know it well. I've given 3 public addresses in Hobart in favour of that.
So the transit, the trackless tram system would work well on that link?
Yeah, well, I did lose some of my friends in the Northern Suburbs Light Rail group when I suggested that, because they do like steel wheels on steel tracks. And I do too, but when they're 10 times the cost and you just can't afford it, then really it's just being a bit cute. So when I discovered the trackless tram, I said, look, this is going to do it so much cheaper. And it is just the same in terms of ride quality and capacity and speed, and it's electric. So we will be able to fit in with all of the agendas that we want. So,
and then you can get that last kilometre without needing to change.
Yeah. So I came to Hobart and talked to Infrastructure Tasmania about it to try and see what could be done. They seem to be very keen on it, and we're pursuing the idea that it could go down a series of main roads in Hobart and be part of that journey around the edge of the city as well. And I don't know what happened to it, but I remember the minister at the time saying that no, the buses will be fine, thanks. And the bus industry do tend to be our problem at the moment, and certainly they worked against every project I've ever won for rail in Perth. It's no one really likes to change when they've got, you know, control of things, but in every opportunity to bring in a rail project where there was more people using public transport, the buses also gained because they have to be part of a network. And the reality is, as Rachel said, it's 2% or something. Well, in public transport, well, you've got a long way to go to improve. And if you could get a trackless tram network in there with lots of local buses as well, then you've got a network that will enable people to get out of their cars. And that's the breakthrough that you need. And that will take time. It's taken us a lot longer than I thought it would in Perth, but we've got a far better network now than we ever had before. And people now say, well, how could we have possibly imagined doing without a rail system in Perth? You go to the football in it, you go to the city, you go to the beach, you go, it's there now. And it becomes part of your life. And to me, that's what you've got to do with good public transport. It's got to become part of your life, not driven by the need to be good for your health or something. You know, it's just got to fit. And trackless trams, I think, will enable a lot of that to happen.
Anton talked before about how much renewable energy is required to take our road transport and electrify it. What about the transmission infrastructure for that? That seems to be something that's kind of on the horizon that people are becoming more concerned about, just how much additional infrastructure we'll need, what that'll do to costs of electricity more broadly, where it's going to go, whose properties it's going to go through, that kind of thing. Can anyone speak to that?
You picked up the little hole in the whole presentation there, Todd. So in Tasmania, we will need more transmission. We've got a relatively strong transmission network. On the mainland, there's going to need heaps of transmission going in, quite high voltage. I haven't worked out where those 4 wind farms would go and whose cables go in whose backyard, because it's probably for it's above my pay grade, I suppose. I'll put it there.
Yeah, but I guess on the cost of infrastructure, it would actually probably increase the utilization of the infrastructure and therefore spread its costs over more usage. So that might actually help from a cost perspective. Obviously, it's a big upfront cost, so spreading it over time is another challenge, but you at least get to spread it over more usage, so that might help.
So even if you got there and went 1.1 billion for the wind farms and another billion for the transmission infrastructure, you've almost got to a year and a half. You're still less than a year and a half's worth of petrol and diesel. So I think for the basic point of the argument is that we spend a truckload of money on petrol and diesel and we don't register it. We go to a service station and we tune out and we drop $100 in a fill up or whatever it is, and it's just hidden. It's hidden like the hand that you just filled up the car with the petrol, and afterwards it smells like petrol.
Yeah.
But you don't acknowledge it. It's a great psychological trick we play on ourselves to ignore the costs of automobile ownership.
Can I make a different point about transmission? I think it is going to be the next big issue for us to work on, that we won't need this massive amount of transmission, that the grids people, they're a bit like my bus lobby. They have their own way of doing things. This is always the way in the past. You have a big power station and then you take your power from that on a long transmission line to the city where people use it. I'm very keen on the distributed model that enables you to do much smaller systems that enable you to use it locally, and therefore you don't need the transmission lines. Now, this has happened in Perth in a way that was never planned, but we just spent a lot of money on putting rooftop solar on, and we are now in a situation where the last coal-fired power stations are about to disappear in the next 2 years because they're just not needed. You can't turn them on anymore, so they're not buying any more coal, and the coal companies are being subsidised just to see out their contracts because they can't get money to reinvest. The reality is 80% of on some days, 80% of the grid is powered by our rooftop solar. In excess, so we use what we need ourselves, and then the excess going into the system is powering the rest of the grid. So the distributed power systems are working far better than the grid people thought. Now they're now getting to the stage of having to curtail it, but we are getting immediately a whole lot more batteries and using them locally. Now we're getting electric vehicles. The electric vehicles are going to be plugged in, and the opportunity is there to have smart systems that will enable them to be recharged at the point where they're needed, where you can use your own system of solar production first. So I think we should be a little slower on the need for transmission, spending billions of dollars on it if we actually don't need it. And the reality is, I know it's sunnier in Perth than Hobart, but it's sunny enough. And in Europe, since Putin took over and ruined the markets for power and gas, the there's been a tremendous increase in local solar and local wind systems and batteries and so on. So people are getting as much more locally as they can. And it was working in Norway and people, you know, to the far north of Scotland. You don't need a lot of sun to get what you need if you get enough PVs out there. So I think we've got a whole new world that's emerging here. And there is a CRC on this called the CRC Race, Reliable, Affordable, Clean Energy, based at UTS in Sydney. And we have a project with them working on how electric vehicles can fit into that model of how they can be the recharge services that enable local areas to be more independent and working in with the grids. And the grid people are very caught. The younger ones can see there is a new way forward. And the older ones are saying, but all the rules and regulations, the manuals, how you do it, how we were taught at university, show that we've got to have big transmission lines and big systems, and that's the only way it'll work. Well, maybe not.
I think not. Well, it's putting the power in the hands of the people is great, both literally and metaphorically. And I think when we're talking about this, we need to increase our energy production, but climate change is just one of the great environmental issues of our time, and addressing it in a way which harms the environment in other ways and people in other ways is what got us into this mess in the first place. So I think, you know, we need to think holistically when we're tackling this issue. And I just wanted to end by just kind of letting people know that the Tasmanian government is developing plans for transport decarbonisation at the moment, and those will be out for public consultation in the coming months, I think. So getting into that process, letting your opinions be known is a great way to make movement on this issue, writing to your MPs and taking up, you know, active and public and EV transport yourself, kind of leading that revolution from the ground is all great ways to do that. And Climate Tasmania are actually hosting a Politics in the Pub event next week on this issue. So I'll post where you can register for that in the chat.
Thanks, Rachel. Ever the activist. Thank you. So Anton, have you got a final word as well? That seems to be how this is working.
Apart from encouraging people to ride an electric bike, which that's, I'm going to jump on your bandwagon there, Margaret, is just I'm just looping back around to what Peter was talking about, transmission and so on, and just the personal cases. We've gone through our family's energy use. We've got an electric car, of course. We've upgrading our solar system on our roof to be 9 kilowatts. And that will provide across the year enough energy to drive my car, or the family's car use and the family's home use. And we've got 2 families living in the same property. So that's about $9,000 worth of solar panels on the roof. Gets you covered for all of your ongoing fuel needs and electricity needs. So it's a lot of upfront, but there's also zero interest loans for that, putting your service station on your own roof. And there's the zero interest state government loans, which can help you out in that space at the moment.
Well, I think, Todd, we'll, if there are other questions we haven't dealt with, those are going to have to go on, disappear into the ether. We need to close our session. But thank you so much to everyone who's spoken. That was inspiring and intriguing, and lots of questions and ideas. And thank you for making substantial contributions to what I hope will be a really serious and important contribution of sustainable living people to the government's development of the transport plan. And thank you to Helen for organising this. Helen is the person who is organising our Food for Thought webinars. Any news on the next one, Helen, or are we?
It'll be September the 26th, and probably housing for sustainable communities. So, yes,
housing,
the next big issue.
Okay. Yep. We want to bite off really big chunks to continue the food for thought metaphor, and we hope that you'll join us again and watch your Facebook feed or wherever you get your alerts from Sustainable Living Tasmania. And thank you again to Anton, Rachel and Peter. It's been fascinating and inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Cheers.